Yay. Little sticky note reminder. Morning, Lindsay. How's life in PR? I didn't figure out the unmute. Oh, audio issues. No worries. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Miss Trish, the dish. What's for breakfast? Yum.
Did you see my breakfast?
No, she saw you chewing.
Oh, oatmeal. It's nothing fun.
Yeah, well, we've got another class going on today, and I debated pushing this off, but I've already changed it so many times that I just decided I'm going to go. It's being recorded. Those of you that are on it, thank you for joining me. Those of you that are watching the recording, hope you enjoyed the fair housing class, because that goes a 6-hour class. So Annie Fitzsimmons is in town today, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so today we are covering condominium purchase and sale agreements. We're going to cover some resale certificate stuff. And then we are going to go on and cover multifamily purchase and sale agreements as well. So condominiums are kind of the affordable housing of our day. I went in this morning because I wanted to pull up a legal description and some CC&Rs and all that good stuff. And I was looking at the prices, and they start in the 200s, 300s, 400s. So whether people are getting into a first home or they're downsizing, but then I'm looking at one right now that's 2.25 million. So those are the upper end retirement for people that want to go into that. Condominiums are a little different. Well, they're actually a lot different from single family residential in that you own usually from what we call the walls in. So from the drywall in is what you own, and that includes everything in the unit, which is appliances, carpet, flooring, cabinets, fixtures, all of that good stuff. Everything from the walls out is common area, and that includes the siding, the roof, the driveway, if there's a clubhouse, if there are other amenities, tennis courts or anything like that, pool, those are all common areas. And the cost to maintain all of those common areas is shared proportionately by the owners of the condominium. So, for example, I live in a condo and there's 8 units. So for maintenance, we don't just take the monthly maintenance and divide it by 8, because some of the units are bigger and some of the units are smaller. So usually they're allocated based on square footage. So that's why if you're looking at 2 condos in the same project, you may see different dues amounts because one might be bigger than the other, and that might be why. A couple other things we're going to cover today are, you've heard the terminology CC&Rs, which stands for covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So when you purchase a condominium, there are limits because you have other owners. There's limits on some of your activities. For example, you can't have a wild party at 2 a.m. because you're going to bother your neighbors. For example, you can't park an RV in the parking area because a lot of times you're actually assigned a parking spot. So there are pet rules. Sometimes now those fall under rules, not CC&Rs. But if somebody has a 20-pound poodle that is the love of their life, then one of the things that we're going to want to check is that pets are allowed. And sometimes, believe it or not, in condominiums, they actually get so specific that they'll say pets are allowed, dogs under 25 pounds. So if they've got a St. Bernard or a Newfoundland, the condo living is probably not going to be for them. They may have 3 cats, 2 dogs, a goldfish, and a hamster. And depending on which condominium they're looking at, that may or may not work for them. Another scenario that we have run into, they actually, in a multi-floor condominium project, get specific about what kind of flooring you can even have. For example, We had a handicapped client one time who was actually in a wheelchair. She was looking at a condo on the third floor of a local condominium project. And one of the things in the CCNRs said that you could not replace the flooring with a hard flooring, even if it was laminate flooring or hardwood flooring or whatever, and without the HOA's permission. And in this case, we found out the HOA would not grant permission for that. Why is that? I don't wear high heels anymore, but some people do. And if you've ever been in a unit underneath or an apartment, whatever, and somebody walks across the floor in high heels, or there's a dog with long toenails, you can a lot of times hear everything. So in that case, when she got the CCNRs and the rules, she reviewed them, she found out, we actually talked to the HOA president, he said no. And so she backed out of that particular sale and we went on to a different one. So these are things, again, you don't want to miss. Deadlines are always critical. I cannot stress that enough. If you learn nothing else out of this series, please, please, please learn how to figure out deadlines. What does 3 days mean? What does 5 days mean? When does the time frame start? So, for example, with condominiums, you get what is called a condominium resale certificate. That is pretty much all of the information from both a financial point of view, the rules point of view, the pets, the CCNRs, everything else. And once the seller provides that, the clock starts ticking and the buyer has 5 days to review and approve or review and disapprove. It's kind of like a Form 17 that way. They don't have to give a reason for disapproval. They can just disapprove and walk away. So I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that's a few of the things with condominiums. Now, on the flip side, they are more affordable. They are a great place sometimes for a first-time home buyer to jump in and get their foot in the door. And then whether they end up keeping that as a rental unit or actually selling it and moving on to a single family home down the road, because finding a single family home in the, let's say, 300 range is difficult, if not impossible. And yet there are lots of condominiums out there in that particular price range. Sometimes you'll have clients that'll say right out of the gate, I don't want a condominium. Don't even show me condominiums. And oh, by the way, my budget, I'm pre-qualified up to $324,000. You've got to have the conversation about the possibility of condo life as a beginning. You do. Because there are restrictions and there are limitations, but there's bonuses too. I work full time. I love the fact I don't have to go out and mow my lawn. I love the fact that we all hire somebody to clean the roof and the gutters every fall. I love the fact that when the complex needed painting a few years ago, we just took money out of our reserve account, hired a painter, and it was done. So there's some pluses, especially for people that don't want to be bothered with the day-to-day maintenance of a property, and or the people that just can't afford to get into a single family home. Anybody else have any ideas of when a condo might be a great fit for a client and they may not know it, or just a great fit? Any ideas on that? Those are two. No? All right, it's Monday morning. I'll let you go. So one other thing is some condominium complexes are, you have to be 50, one of the buyers has to be 55 or older. Why would that be an advantage to a senior or retiring person? Well, maybe they've raised their family, they've had their kids, they don't want a bunch of kids rolling around. So, for example, Cordata, the Cordata, most of the condos out in the Cordata area here in Bellingham are seniors. So what does that mean? So let's say the wife is 60 and the husband is 40. As long as one of them is 55 or older, then there's absolutely no problem. Could a young couple go in and buy when they're 23 and 27? No, it's what they call an age restricted complex. So that's another consideration. So, I mean, I've only been talking for 10 minutes and you can already see some of the complexities of listing or selling a condominium and some of the things you might want to investigate for your clients, whether it's the seller, and the seller may or may not know all of this. And the buyer may or may not know a lot of this. Just remind them they're going to have an opportunity to review not only a Form 17, because that is still required, but also a condominium resale certificate, or in the case of new construction. Actually, it's not even new construction. It's in the case of a condominium complex where title has never transferred. Now, why do I say that's not necessarily new construction? Well, here in Bellingham, there's a complex out by Lake Watcom, Lakeview condos, I think they're called. And when they built those back in the, I think, 80s, the market was in a downturn. So they were built as condominiums. They set up CC&Rs. They had an HOA, but the developer builders said, this is probably not a great time for me to be selling condos. The prices are falling. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rent them all out. And there's like 100 units in there. So you just turn them all into rentals for 10 years and rented them all out. And then when the market finally turned, he said, okay, now I think it's a good time to be actually starting to sell these units. So he went in one by one, freshened them up, put in new appliance packages, paint them, replaced the carpet, and put them on the market as condominiums for sale. He still needed to provide what's called a public offering statement, which is required the first time title transfers on a condominium, even though they were 10 years old. So don't be confused by the fact that the units are 10 years old and they require a POA or a public offering certificate, because it is the first time title transfers. Now, do we have any new condominium complexes around here? There aren't as many, unfortunately, in the state of Washington. There were a lot of repair issues with condominiums back in the day. For example, decks leaked, siding leaked, and it went back to the original contractor. And there were lawsuits that entailed. And so the builder would get sued after the fact, have to go in, not the Riptide condos, but the ones right down here on the boulevard. Anyway, it was like a year-long project. They had to reskin the building. They had to fix all the decks because they were sloped the wrong way. They were sloped back down towards the unit. So the water was actually coming down and getting in. There was it was about a $200,000 or $300,000 repair, probably more. Shelley lives there. But so the builders kind of got gun shy about probably 10 years ago and said, condos might not be such a great deal, because you build them and then if there's any problems, you can still be held responsible and lose all your profit, have to go in and fix them. So you know what? I think we're going to build multifamily, but I don't think we're going to build condominiums, which is why you don't see a lot of brand new condominium projects around. They're starting to come back. They're starting to change some of the laws down in Olympia for condos, but it's still not that common. One other thing that you can see with a condominium project, I used to live in a 5-unit building when I was renting for a little while, and the units were big. The apartment I was renting was 1,600 square feet, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, had a beautiful view of the bay, and there was 4 other units that were either that big or bigger. So what could easily happen is somebody could have bought that 5-unit building and done what they call a condo conversion, where they actually take an apartment building and they go through the legalities of converting it into a condominium. They write CC&Rs, they set up the rules. Now, in that particular case, again, it's a brand new offering. Title has never been transferred as a condominium. So as those individual units are being sold, that is when the developer or the seller would have to provide a public offering statement. So the difference between a condo resale certificate and a public offering statement looks like a phone book. It's all of the legalities and everything they went through to set up and make the condominium legal, where a resale certificate, you just attach covenants, the CC&Rs that are already written, the rules, the budget, the financials, and boom, you're done. It's still a good sized document. It can easily run a couple hundred pages or more. But the public offering statement you will rarely see. They have the same restrictions on the time. Once your client buyer receives either the resale cert or the public offering statement, they have so many days to review it. make sure they do. Make sure they do. They're usually emailed because they are so big. They might say, hey, Trish, would you, go through there, and if you see anything, let me know. Don't do it. This is not your job. This is not your responsibility to go through and try and pick out things that are important to them. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't even lay eyes on it and go through it anyway? No. But you need to make sure that your client, the buyer, actually goes through, reads the document. If they have any questions, you can have a discussion. So you need to go through and read it. You might want to point things out. Maybe they missed the rule about the 25-pound dog and they've got a Newfoundland that weighs 160 pounds. You might want to make sure that you see that and point that out to them. Or the hardwood flooring, if they plan on going in and doing a total gut job remodel on it. These are things you might want to point out, but it is not your responsibility to be the sole person who is looking over this and pointing them out to your clients. So, hey, you guys, will you do me a favor? Will you turn your cameras on? Because it's really hard for me sitting here just looking at a whole bunch of names on the screen. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, there you are. Hi. Yeah, this way I can get some engagement. Keep going. I'm still missing a couple. So off we go into the world of condominiums. Any questions so far? Is this making sense to you? Is this ringing little bells from back in your real estate school days and all that other good stuff? Okay. So I am going to go on and I am going to do a screen share. Let me get up what I want to get up here. Okay. All right, here we go. Condominium purchase and sale agreement. Now, don't forget, you can go to the manual for the Northwest Multiple Forms if you're filling one of these out and you can't remember what goes where. Because I even went back and reread it this morning, and it's very helpful. It's a really great refresher when your client says, hey, Adam, what's a condo resale certificate again? And what's the difference between that and a Form 17? What does that look like? We're going to go through that today, and I'm actually going to show you a sample of one so you can see what it looks like. A lot of this is exactly the same as a residential, but some of it is very, very different. So the top part is exactly what you're used to looking at. Date, buyer, seller, the whole 9 yards. Tax parcel number, but here's the first thing that you're going to see that is different, and that would be the unit number. They usually have a unit number, although, for example, in the case of where I live, I don't have a unit number. Each of my 8 units in my complex has individual addresses. So if it doesn't have a unit number, just leave that blank. So residential condominium, what goes in here is the name of the complex. So in the case of mine, it would be the Forest Lane condominiums. Is there a assigned parking number? That will be in the listing agreement. And that can be really important because they might have 3 cars and they're only assigned 1 parking spot. So there's usually guest parking. There's usually additional parking available, but you do need to look and find out what the rules on that would be. The other thing is there a storage unit that goes with it? And oh, by the way, is that storage unit included in the price? There's a complex over here on 32nd Street, for an example. And we ran into this once where we actually wrote up the purchase and sale. We got almost to closing. Thank God we didn't close because we found out that the storage was not included, even though they had a storage unit that the buyer went and looked at. We found out that that was sold separately or rented separately from the complex. So as soon as the condo changed hands, that storage unit went away. And so did their parking unit or parking number. So we had to go back and renegotiate prior to closing to get them a storage unit. Hopefully there's one available, and find out which parking spot. And sometimes there are additional costs for this. So these are things when you're going through getting ready to write an offer, you might want to have a conversation with the listing broker. If you know there's a storage unit that goes with the complex, is there any additional cost? They should put that in the listing agreement, but they don't always do it. So just heads up on that. The street address, straightforward, city, county, state, zip. But then you get down here to something called a declaration. And you notice nowhere in here does it say legal description. What's my number one rule about a valid contract? You have to have a legal description, right? Well, wait a minute. I'm in a condominium purchase and sale agreement and it doesn't even talk about a legal description. Why is that? Because in a condominium, the legal description is actually the declaration recording number that you will attach, just like a legal description, and it will never be not available because it just won't be. It's required in the multiple to be actually attached. So let me go.
Hey, Lori.
Yep.
So I had somebody ask me the other day that you used to have to initial the legal description, but they said you don't have to do it anymore. Is that correct?
So the rule on that is this: develop your own personal best practice. What's the easiest way to prove that you've given someone a copy of the legal description? Well, have them initial it. So when you do your purchase and sale agreement, you would include the legal description in the contract package. Stick an athenocite on there and have them initial it. That's the best practice.
Okay.
However, if you stuck the legal description in the purchase and sale agreement package, sent it all off, they initialed everything, but you forgot to put, or you just chose not to put an initial stamp on the legal description page, and yet it went off with the whole package and it was returned with the whole package, it is still considered delivered.
Okay.
It's just the easiest way to prove that you did deliver it is to have everybody initial it. Now, you'll deal with some listing brokers who absolutely positively insist that you have to initial that. Don't argue with them. That is best practice. Just have your buyer initial it or have your seller initial it, because that is a good practice to get into. It's the easiest way to prove that you have delivered something. So,
Okay. Thank
there's
you.
your answer. You're welcome. So everybody looking at my listing page here on Northwest Multiple, give me a thumbs up if you are. Yep. Okay. So I'm in here in a condominium and I'm going to go right here over to supplements. I'm going to pull that open and look at all the goodies I've got in here. Oh, look, there's my legal description. Let's look at what it looks like for a condo. They actually attached the deed. And here it is. The following described real estate situated in Whatcom County. It's Unit 204, Edgewater Place, according to the looky here declaration thereof, recorded under auditor's file number this. So you are going to attach this legal description to your purchase and sale agreement. And it talks about an auditor's file number, which if you go back to here, we have our declaration number right in here. And there was, where was it? Your tax parcel number. The easiest thing to do, because there was no declaration there, you would actually have to go into into the title, is to just attach everything as Exhibit A and include that front page off of your purchase and sale or off of your listing agreement. So does that make sense? They call it a declaration number. They don't call it a legal description. So don't panic when you get to a purchase and sale. You go to fill it out and there's no legal description box to be filled out on here. They go by the declaration recording number. It's the only exception to the legal description as we know it rule. Okay? Included items. This is going to be the same as any other residential transaction: purchase price, earnest money, default, title company, closing agent, individual closing date, possession date. All that's the same. Service of closing agent for payment of utilities, charges and assessments levied before but due after closing. You need to be a little more careful in a condominium because there may be something called a special assessment. Now, what is a special assessment in a condominium? What that is there is work that needs to be done on the complex itself, outside of those walls, that everybody needs to share in the cost of. Let's say they need a new roof. The building's old, the roof's 20 years old, it needs replacing, and they have $40,000 in reserve, which is great, except a new roof on a complex might run $80,000. I'm just making numbers up here, right? So they're $40,000 short. of being able to pay for a new roof. They haven't saved enough money in their reserve account to be able to pay for that. So what happens? The individual owners get together at a special meeting or at one of their regularly scheduled meetings, and they vote whether they should give themselves what's called a special assessment. What does that mean? Well, in my case, going back to my example with my 8 units, and we've got a $40,000 shortage, we would take the 40,000 and keep it simple, divide it by 8. You don't really, it still goes by square footage, but everybody would contribute somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000. 8 times 5 is 40 to make up the shortage, and that is what is called a special assessment. Now, what if that special assessment has been voted on? And so it's been scheduled, but you're closing in August and the roofer is really busy until October, and you're closing in September. There will be a special assessment that has been levied and it's going to be due, but it isn't going to be paid by the time you get to closing. So if you don't check the box on here that it will be prepaid in full by seller at closing, guess who gets to assume that $5,000 special assessment? That would be your buyer. Your buyer would be on the hook if it is not addressed for anything that you don't say will be prepaid in full by seller at closing. So next question might be, well, the seller is probably not going to want to pay that $5,000 because they're not even going to live there anymore. So who's going to get the benefit of the new roof? Well, the new buyer is. So how do you go about getting this negotiated? You negotiate. So in your original offer, if you're representing a buyer, you would stipulate that the seller will pay the special assessment in full at closing. All right. So you're going to check this box, but I would also call it out so that there is absolutely no confusion on this. And so let's say then the seller comes back and this happens and says, nope, I'm not paying it. You're getting it for a good price. I'm not contributing another penny. You want this unit, Mr. Buyer, you are going to pay the $5,000 special assessment. It gets down to basic negotiation. There is no legality for that. There is no ins and outs. There is no right or wrong. It's who is the better negotiator. Maybe they'll split it. It's not uncommon, though, for the seller to pay it. So if you're taking a listing on a condominium, that's one of the questions. You want to be sure and ask your seller, are there any pending special assessments? What's it for? When are they due? And let's talk about how that is going to be negotiated when you get a purchase agreement on this property. And then you're going to talk about it and you're going to kind of have a game plan in mind. So that way, if a buyer broker calls you up and says, hey, we're getting ready to write an offer on this, what's the deal with the special assessment? You can say, I've already had the conversation with the seller, they're not paying. So that'll be up to your buyer and take it from there. So that's how that works. We've got FIRPTA. I haven't covered that yet. That's the Foreign Investment Relations something Tax Act. We'll cover that another time. Here's the other part that gets to be different from a regular purchase and sale. Remember that public offering statement I talked about? First time title is transferred. Here's where it's going to show up. The resale certificate is for every subsequent title transfer after the first one. So has it been received? Did the buyer get it prior to closing? Or is it going to be delivered to the buyer within, usually it's 10 days after mutual acceptance. So resale certificates can come from 2 sources. Resale certificates can come from 2 sources. So one of the sources, actually, I'm going to share screen again. Sources is the Northwest Multiple. This is for a small complex that may not have a management company. Now, if a condominium complex has a professional management company, that is who will be providing the condominium resale certificate in 9 times out of 10. And they will charge a fee, and the max, according to Washington law, is $275. Just FYI. But let's say it's a little complex. There's only 4 units or 8 units. We don't have a professional management company. The secretary for the association or the president for the association can actually fill this out. And as a convenience, the multiple has provided the form. Now, the common question I get, I'm writing an offer on a condo. Do I need to include a condo resale certificate? Because I don't see one uploaded into supplements. And the answer is no. That is the seller's responsibility to order, pay for, and provide to the buyer the condo resale certificate. And oh, by the way, that's an RCW, that's Washington law. They have to provide that. This is on here because let's say you have a listing and it's a small complex and the seller says, we don't have a management company. We're a little association. We just kind of do our own thing. Can they fill this out? Yes, they can, because this mirrors the RCW requirements from Washington law. So here's your condo resale certificate. And who fills it out? Can't be the seller. It needs to be a representative of the association. Because it says right here, it needs to be prepared by the association, its officer or authorized agent. It cannot be prepared by the real estate broker. So when they say, hey, Adam, can't you just take care of that for me? Nope, sorry, it says right here, you can't. And it also says, and this is the thing with condo resale certificates that I would say gets missed in the homemade ones that we're looking at right now. I would say this gets missed at least 50% of the time. It says the preparer must answer each question and attach every exhibit listed. Well, they answer all the questions, but they might only throw 1 or 2 exhibits on here. And without every single exhibit that is listed in this resale certificate, because remember, this is required by law in Washington state. This isn't a Northwest multiple form. Then you don't have a valid resale certificate, and your buyer has the opportunity, just like a Form 17, to walk up until the day of closing. And actually, this has more teeth than a Form 17. A Form 17 expires at closing. So once a property closes, if the seller didn't provide it, the buyer really doesn't have any recourse unless they can prove the seller deliberately withheld information. This survives closing. This resale certificate survives closing, and it actually has more legal teeth if it was filled out incorrectly, or somebody lied on it, or didn't provide everything on it. There are some legal ramifications. I'm not going to get into those. So the preparer and the unit owner must sign the certificate. So when the seller receives it, they have to sign it. And if there's, insufficient space, just, add another piece of paper. It says right here, a buyer is not liable for any unpaid assessment or fee against the unit greater than the amount set forth below. So if the seller says, yep, we got a special assessment coming up, it's $5,000 for that new roof, and they actually list it in here under a special assessment. And then after closing, the buyer finds out that, oh, there's also the building needs painting, and there's another special assessment, and this one's for $8,000. Nobody mentioned it. The buyer has recourse to go back after the seller, or it would be the seller who would go back after the preparer of this form to say, hey, you guys never talked about this. I'm not responsible for this. We never want to get to that point. I've actually never seen that happen, but it is spelled out in here. So when you're working with a buyer and they're a little bit nervous, you can go through this and take the time to go through this top couple of paragraphs with them. It's going to make them feel better. A unit owner is not liable to the purchaser for failure or delay of the association to provide the certificate in a timely manner. What does that mean? That means that most HOAs are pretty good about getting the certificate in 10 days. Yeah, but some of them, you know what, they get busy, the management company, and it might be 12 days or 15 days. Now, the buyer has the opportunity to walk away from the contract up until the time that they receive the resale certificate completed and 5 days. So they have 5 days to review. So if they get it on day 12, then they would have 5 days, which are, oh, by the way, what kind of days? Business days, right? To review it. So what if they get it 10 days before closing? They have the opportunity to cancel the contract up until the time they receive it plus 5 days. So this is really important to keep a transaction together, that you get this in a timely manner. And sometimes it might be up to you guys to bug the HOA to make sure they do it. The purchaser's contract is voidable right here by the purchaser until the certificate has been provided and for 5 days thereafter, or until conveyance, whichever occurs first. So if you get it 3 days before closing and it closes 3 days later, they haven't had the full 5 days, but they're not going to get the full 5 days because the closing date will actually trump on this one. Information furnished based on the books and record of the association, the actual knowledge of the preparer, neither the association, and nobody warrants the information, and neither assumes any obligation to update it. So they provide the condominium resale certificate on August 22nd, and your closing is scheduled for October 1st. And on September 1st, they have a special meeting and they vote in a bunch of charges or special assessments or whatever. The preparer of this has no obligation to update this form. That does not mean they don't have an obligation to actually inform the buyer of the new special assessment. Two different things. Right of first refusal. It is very common in condominiums for the HOA itself, the homeowners association that runs the complex, to have a right of first refusal. A good example, there's a complex out by Lake Whatcom. And so every time a unit goes on the market out there, it's actually in their CC&Rs that the HOA and the owners of the individual units in that complex have a right of first refusal for 10 days after it goes on the market. And it is not uncommon for that to be exercised. There's people in there that maybe they're in a smaller unit and they want to move to a bigger unit. And so they want to have the option to purchase that as a right of first refusal. So do check that out. If you're a listing broker, that's something that you'll need to investigate. If you're a selling broker, it should be disclosed. It's not on all complexes at all, but it is not uncommon either. So be sure to look for it. The current monthly assessment, these are commonly known as dues, right? You pay monthly dues on a condo. I think we all know that. They ask how much of them, that was bad English. Anyway, what's the amount that is past due or unpaid? How many people are in arrears or default? How many haven't paid their dues? Why do you want to know that? Well, you want to know about this form is all about discovering the financial health of the complex. Because if you're going to go in and buy into a condominium complex, you want to know how much money is in reserve. What are their bills? Are people paying their dues? Because if there's 8 units and 7 of them stop paying their dues, then, and you're the Lone Ranger, then you're going to get stuck paying all the bills until they can take legal action to bring those other people current. You don't ever want to get in that situation. Are there any special assessments? So that would be that $5,000 for the roof. How much of that amount is past due? Is everybody paid? And sometimes they spread it out over time. Is there a balance per month or other? Now, you have $5,000. Let's say they're making monthly payments of $50 and it goes on for 10 years. I don't know. At the time of closing or during your negotiations representing a buyer, you can certainly ask the seller to pay that off in full. And that would actually probably be good practice, or at least try and negotiate that. In addition to monthly and special assessments, there is blank past due and unpaid against the unit for maybe they haven't paid their taxes, maybe they haven't paid their, there was a death in the family and they haven't made their dues payments for the last 3 months. Well, the property's in probate and this is an estate sale and it's being sold as an estate. That'll all be cleared up at closing. Delinquent assessments receivable as of, there has to be a date within 45 days, so it has to be current. There's monthly assessments, special assessments again in the unit that are past due of over 30 days, none or totaling. Again, financial health. Delinquent association obligations within 45 days. Are there any bills that are past due? Fees. The following fees are paid by the unit owners, and here's where you're going to want to take a really close look. Now, remember, I'm looking at the multiple form, but this will also be on a regular HOA form because these are questions required by law. This is where you're going to go to find out, do they charge fines if you park in the wrong parking spot or have a barbecue on your deck, or late payments. Is there a fine for late payments? Is there a move-in fee? I own a condo in Kirkland, and every time somebody moves in and out of that, there's like $150 move-in, move-out fee that they do because they say it's wear and tear on the elevator, the building, and everything else. Do they pay for their resale certificates? Almost always they do. Any copying of records? Is there a fee for parking? Is there that fee for storage that I talked about? Rental of units. So why would there be a fee for that? Well, I decide I want to rent my unit and the HOA is going to charge a fee to maybe check out the person who is going to be renting, the use of common facilities. So is there a rental fee? There's a clubhouse, and yeah, every time I can rent it, it's $75 if I want to rent it during the day, or $150 if I want to rent it at night. That's where all of those things go. Or if you've got rules that spell all of those out, they would be in the rules, by the way. You would look there as well. And then they've got other. So you can see there's a lot of general information just about the complex on the first page, right? Now we're going to get in, and this is also really good for you guys to know when you're representing a buyer, because the buyer is going to have a million questions if they've never owned a condo before. So remember, once you get your resale cert, a lot of these questions are going to be spelled out, and the buyer is going to have 5 days to review. And if they don't like anything they see on here, so they're going to have to make an offer normally in order to get a resale certificate. You don't normally see them posted, although sometimes you do. There are or are not anticipated repair or replacement costs in excess of 5% of the annual budget. So in the case of painting or that new roof, that might be in excess of 5%, but maybe they're redoing the landscaping and the cost is only going to be $800 and their annual budget is $50,000. Well, that's certainly not in excess, so that won't be listed. The association has cash reserves for repair or replacement as follows. If this none box is checked, you better take a really hard look. Number one, you're going to have trouble finding a lender that's going to do financing, because the lender is going to look at the financial health more than anything of the complex. So that's another protection for a buyer. When you sell a unit, when you sell a condo and your buyer goes to the bank to get a loan, the bank is going to send a questionnaire to the homeowners association asking all these questions about their finances. And if they don't like, they being the bank, don't like the answers that they get, they're not going to make the loan. Your buyer can be gold, but if they don't like the complex, they're not going to make the loan. So it's no different than residential in that the property has as big of a piece of qualifying as your buyer does. I always say it's 50-50. Judgments and suits. Are there unsatisfied judgments against the association that would be for non-payment? That's rare to see that. Are there any pending suits or legal proceeding in which the association's a party? Here's where, oh, the decks were put on incorrectly. All the units are flooding. They all need to be ripped off and replaced. So we've sued the contractor. Or again, back to my condo in Kirkland, I was going to refinance it a year and a half ago. Going along, everything's going great. And all of a sudden I get a call from the lender and they said, we got a problem. And I said, what? And they said, you have a pending lawsuit against your association. I said, we do? Since when? And they said, well, somebody did a slip and fall in the parking lot and they sued the association. Now we have errors and omissions that's going to cover that. And I'm sure we're going to win, but that was a pending lawsuit. You know what that did to my loan? Put the brakes on it, and I, to this day, have not been able to refinance it. I got to check again and see if that damn thing was. So we won, we being the HOA, won the claim, and then the plaintiff appealed. So it's still tied up in litigation over some stupid, I can't get a loan. There is not a lender out there that will give me a loan as long as there's pending litigation on a property. Alterations or improvements that violate, there are or not alterations or improvements. Usually that has to do with the exterior. Maybe they have gone out and they built a garden around their front patio, and that is against the HOA little rules, but everybody kind of turns a blind eye, but you better disclose it and you better look at this. This gets back to the original public offering statement type now. So let's say we've gone through that, but how many units in the association are still owned by the declarant or the developer? Why would that be important? Because there's not a lot of individual homeowners who are going to have the same vested interest in maintaining the property as the developer, for example. Or when they ask how many units have delinquent dues, well, if the developer owns 75% of the units and they're making their payments, that's really not a good snapshot. You're not going to see a lot of those, but you're going to see some. Have they transferred the control of the association? Usually when they have a new complex and 50% of the units get sold, the developer says, set up your HOA for the new 50% owners, set up your HOA, elect a board, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and I'm going to transfer the control of the association. I'm going to turn it over to you. So you're going to be in charge of the finances, the billing, the budget, setting up all your vendors, all that other good stuff. Of the total units, how many are principal residences? Why is that important? Well, that's number one, a lender will look at that because let's face it, lenders are under the impression that the more owner-occupied units are in a complex, the better care they are going to take of the complex. Because renters, if somebody owns a rental unit, they may not be as interested in getting new paint or new roof or anything as an owner-occupied unit will, because they actually live there. And how many are second homes and how many are vacant? There is or is not anybody that owns 10% or more. So somebody out of 8 units, let's say they own 2 of them, that's where that would go. Code violations, is there anything in there with the complex that is violating the code? The title of the unit is held fee simple or leasehold. Normally you will see fee simple. That means you own the land that is underneath the complex. Leasehold is kind of like Shelter Bay, which means you lease the land that the building is sitting on in the condominium. So help me out here. There's condos in Shelter Bay. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm pretty sure I've been in them. That would be an example of you have a condominium complex sitting on land that the HOA does not own. They are leasing it from the tribe and it's going to have a set remaining life on that. So you need to get all that information. Condominium's been approved for financing by Fannie, Freddie, VA, and FHA. Why does that make a difference? Well, if you have a VA buyer and the complex has not been, quote, approved, it hasn't gone through the approval process to be VA approved, you cannot get a VA loan or an FHA loan. Now, that's a conversation to have with your lender. Some of these are not hard to get approval for. And just because you don't have approval from, say, Fannie or Freddie doesn't mean that you can't get it and they won't make the loan. But again, financing is always a part and parcel of these purchase and sale agreements that you're going to be working on. The insurance. So there's a master policy. So there's an insurance policy that takes care of everything from the walls out. And it's called a master policy for the complex. And they insure the siding, the roof, just like a home, but they're not insuring anything on the inside. Who's responsible for that? The homeowner. So what are they going to have to pay? Normally that insurance is included in your dues. What is not included in your dues is the insurance on your walls your unit itself. It's different from renter's insurance because renter's insurance really usually covers just personal belongings. In this particular case, you as an owner are going to get a insurance policy so that if the building, heaven forbid, burns down and they need to replace it, you've got drywall, you've got floor, you've got fixtures, you've got things besides your personal property that the buyer, that will be an additional cost that they will have to pay for. But it's nominal, it's not that expensive, but the bigger policy is going to be covered in their dues. So, warranties claims, are they covered by a warranty? Usually they're not. This is new. Electric vehicle charging stations, this becomes more and more common. If somebody has a brand new Tesla or is planning on buying one, you better take a look here and see if they've actually got a place that they're going to be able to plug in. This is what I was talking about with the exhibits, and this is the one that gets ignored in at least 50% of the of the resale certs that I look at that are homemade. Without these, you do not have a valid and complete condo resale certificate. So what gets to be included? The declaration showing the recording numbers. That's an easy one. That one's always recorded. The bylaws. That's an easy one. That's usually recorded. Make sure they're up to date and you're getting the most recent copy. The rules and regulations, on the other hand, now the rules and regulations are usually where things like pets, barbecuing, parking, parties, noise, contractor times they can work, all of those things are going to be included there. They are not recorded. They are not recorded. So you are going to have to go, if the listing broker doesn't have a copy of them, you are probably going to have to get in touch with the HOA and request a copy. Start with the listing broker who can go to the seller, who should be the one to go to the HOA. And that's usually how it works. But just remember that rules and regs are not normally recorded. So they should be uploaded. They are not always. Annual financial statement of the association, including an audit report, if there is one, for the year immediately preceding. So in this case, we'd be looking at 2021. So what was the snapshot for the 12 months of 2021 for this complex? And there should be a profit and loss, and there should be a balance sheet. And it'll show the money in reserve. It'll show what the expenses are. That is the financial health, but that's also, God, this is August. So that ended in December 31st. So we get down to the next one, and it says a balance sheet and revenue and expense, P&L, prepared on an accrual basis. They even get into the tax accounting. How is it done? Which shall be current to within 120 days. Now we're talking. Now we're getting within the last 4 months, we're going to get a much better picture of what the financial health is. So you get the picture from last year, you get the picture from this year. The current operating budget of the association. So what does it cost on a month-to-month basis to run this place? Association current reserve study. So a reserve study is required by law in Washington state for complexes over a certain number of units. And I apologize, I can't tell you what that is. I know as a small one with 4, we don't have to have one. We had one a few years ago. What's a reserve study? You actually hire someone to come in. They go not only to the complex itself and look at the condition of the roof, the siding, the driveway, and all of that good stuff. And then they say, looks to me like the roof's got about 10 more years remaining life. So in 2032, you're going to be looking at replacing a roof. I'm estimating the cost to be $80,000. That goes into the reserve study. Oh, gee, the paint is peeling. That's probably going to have to be done next year. That's going to be a $40,000 job. So that's going to go in under 2023. And a reserve study basically goes out 10 years, and it looks at all the predicted expenses and when they should be completed for the big ticket items. It adds up what all those expenses are going to cost on an annual basis. It looks at how much money is in your reserve account. Do you have enough money to pay for all this good stuff? And if not, they are going to make a recommendation to either raise dues to be large enough to cover all of this, or heads up, you're probably going to have a special assessment in order to pay for all these things that you do. So if there is a reserve study, it's kind of like a giant Excel spreadsheet when you look at it. And I'll show you one here in a minute. So if there is one, the larger complexes are required to do, and I think it's every 4 years, and then with updates in between on year 2, 3, and 4, and then they have to get another new one. And then here's the heads up to the buyer. If they don't have one, certain risks to you, insufficient reserves may require you to pay on demand a special assessment. So heads up, Mr. Buyer. Just because they don't have one doesn't mean it's not a good deal. You just need to be even more careful at taking a look at the reserves. So I'm back here. So all of these things, the declaration, the bylaws, the rules, the annual, the year-to-date financial, the operating budget, if there's a reserve, that is all supposed to be attached to this as an exhibit. You would not believe how many times all I see uploaded is the condiment, this form right here. This is it. And they think they're done, and they're not done, because without all of that financial information, how in the heck can you make a decision on this? So, and that's the end of it. But that actually gives you an idea. Did you have any idea all that was in a condo resale certificate? That's the guts of your purchase agreement. So in addition to your purchase and sale agreement that you're going to complete, you are going to go through this very carefully and make sure your buyer does as well. And if there's anything that jumps out at you, just be sure and call that to their attention. I think it's important that you do. Don't just get it, pass it on to your buyer, although legally that's really all we're supposed to do, and throw it in a file. I'm not a proponent of that. Well, I'm saying you should not be the loan reviewer. I think you at least need to lay eyes on it, because you may have a very unsophisticated purchaser. Maybe they're really young, maybe they're really old, I don't know. But they wouldn't know how to read a financial if it fit them. And so you at least need to take a look at this. If you don't know how to read a financial, that might be something you might want to add to your to-do list, is learn how to read a P&L. So let me go back here and see. So I'm going to share. Here we go. This is one that I found online, and this is actually an old one because it's from 2010. It's been updated with the electric car thing anyway. So, but here, I just want to have you look at one that has been completed, what it kind of looks like. So the monthly dues are $318. There's nothing past due. But look at this. There's an unpaid special assessment of $14,000. And then they spell out what it is. Envelope rehabilitation is basically the exterior skin of the building. And then what the seller is paying. Now you need to go in and negotiate if the seller's going to pay that off prior to closing, or if you're just going to assume the $117.65. Delinquent dues, there weren't any. That's good. So, and here's they spell out their fines, $275 for the resale, and actually that's a fee. And that's it. Anticipated repairs, none. Oh, look at this. They have $576,000 in reserves. And 215 of that, or 214,699, has been set aside for envelope rehabilitation, that's siding. But that's still going to leave them a nice chunk of change in the bank. $360,000, give or take, is still going to be left behind. So that's a very healthy financial complex. There's 84 units. None are owned by the developer. 75 of them are principal residences. That's a good thing. 8 of them are rented. There's no code violations. Here's the insurance company. You get down here. And here is some more disclosure about the special assessment. This is going to get interesting. Let's see. No attachments. Oh, wait a minute. Here's the attachments that came along. So here's what a balance sheet looks like, just so you know. And by the way, if you've never seen one of these before, go online, go to the Northwest Multiple, pick a condominium, go to supplements, and look at one of these. So you know kind of, because they're all different. They're all going to be a little bit different. This one's obviously very professionally done. It doesn't have to be typed out like this. It can literally be written on the back of a cocktail napkin. And that will suffice as long as the information is there. So here's their reserve study. It's 52 pages long. If you've never seen a reserve study and you want to do some homework on what a condominium complex entails, here's a nice one. It's who prepared it, when it was prepared. Here's your table of contents. Down here, let's see. When we get to, go all the way down because I think it's in the very back. Component assessment and valuation. Isn't this interesting? So it actually gets into the details of how much asphalt, how much driveway, 66,555 square feet. They figure it's going to cost $2.85. It's got 23 years remaining life, 40 years useful life. The total cost is $189,000. Cost per unit, average cost per unit per year. So it gets into some really interesting details. When you go to the very bottom, so what they're saying is the average cost per unit per year should be $982. Well, I'll guarantee you if I go to this listing, there is not $982 in dues, which means that they're not quite collecting enough to cover all these predicted replacement items, which means there may be a special assessment in there somewhere. It gets into a lot of the weeds. I'm not going to go all the way through it, but like I said, there's 52 pages and you should at least take a look at it. Here's a sample of what an association meeting. Read these. This is where the good stuff is buried. This is where they talk about, oh, the roof is probably going to get shot in the next year, maybe two. We really should think about, starting to get some bids for that. They approved the minutes. Treasurer's report was audited. That's a good thing. Volunteer team reports. Here's all their different activities they did. You can kind of get a sense of what the personality of the HOA is. How involved are people as far as having committees and all of that? Elections. They obviously have new property managers. Here's another one. So the minutes should be attached. And like I said, read them because this is going to be a really good snapshot for you. Here's the budget. Remember I said they needed to have a budget attached to it. So this has got all kinds of good stuff. The financials are in there. And again, if you haven't seen one, go look at one. I'm going to show you a sample of another one. This one is kind of interesting. Look at this one. Obviously done by a not professional company. That's okay. Nothing that says it has to. But you can see here, there's a lot more scribble, and I would take a really close look at this, just because I would want to make sure that what they're saying is, they've obviously done their homework on it. Anticipated repairs, it's all hand done, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be typewritten. So the work for the clubhouse painting's been done. They're just waiting for the invoice on that. Then you go down here. No insurance provided by association for the real or personal property of unit owners, which is normal. They're a little confused. But Steve Weidenbach or whatever his name is, I would still put a call in to make sure that that is in fact covering the outside of the building. So they were a little unclear on what they were asking here, but they were trying really hard when they filled it out. So they pointed out that these things are already recorded, the declarations and the bylaws. So go take it, go find them yourself. Technically, that's not the way to do it, but this would probably get you there. And then they went, oops, we don't do our accounting on an accrual. We do it on a cash basis. We don't have a reserve study. And let's go down here and see, not seeing the finances. See it? Or did I go to another one? Nope. So here's your meeting minutes. They were good. They did attach those. Another meeting minutes. Oh, Fairside Condos. Here's their budget. So they actually, even though the resale cert itself was handwritten, they attached the correct exhibits. So you can see what the normal expenses are. You can also see what the association is paying and not paying. All right. I'm going to take a break. I've been all the way through the condo resale cert. You can see it is a wealth of information. You need to know what you're looking for. You need to take the time to go pull a few of these up because not every single, a lot of the condos that are listed on market will have them. I found those. I found those out of an old file, but they're on there. So that's what that covers. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to work on purchase and sale agreement here. So we have pointed out public offering, resale cert, condominium assessment. This is the, $490 a month. And people always ask me, what should I put in here for a deposit equal to? Usually it's 1 month. They don't really have extra money that you pay ahead. The most might be 2. But that's just on the monthly dues. That's what they mean when they talk about condominium assessment. All right, back here. I'm going to skip through this because everything else, purchase price, until we get to the very end, closing, possession, all of this should look really familiar to you because this is all just like residential. Notices, computation of time, offer, counteroffer, agency disclosure, property condition disclaimer, we're not responsible, go do your own due diligence. But oh, look, we're right at the very end. And here are 3 paragraphs that are different in a condo purchase and sale than there is in residential. You need to know these are here so that you can go through these with your buyer. The first one talks about public offering statement, which in reality, you will probably rarely, if ever, have to cover. Because again, most of the units that you're going to be selling or listing are going to be resale units. The exception would be if you actually land a listing on an entire complex, in which case the developer is going to give you a public offering statement for you to give to clients. Take your time, read it, but it's rare you're going to see them. So let's go right to resale cert. So it spells out, it only applies if it's not, if you don't need a public offering statement. And like I said, it is required by law. If you're really curious, go look up RCW 64.34, take a peek at it, see what's in it. It's pretty straightforward. If the buyer hasn't received their resale cert, then the seller agrees to deliver it by a date specified in specific term 16. Remember that was on the front page, and I said usually leave them 10 days. That's normally enough. And if they don't get it on day 10, or they don't waive their right if they don't get it within the 10 days. If they get it on day 12, then their 5 days starts after day 12. So just a reminder, if you receive the resale cert on day 12, when does your time frame begin? When does your time frame begin for the 5-day review? I got it on day 12. When does it start? This is basic. Come on, I'm not moving on until somebody answers me. This is simple. Right? Donovan? Oh, now I know who's not paying attention. Morgan, you got this one.
Does it start on day 12? No.
It's okay. You tried. When does it start? It starts on day 13, because remember this rule?
The day after.
Correct. You never count the day of delivery. You never count the day of delivery. You always count the day following. And if it is 5 days or less, these are business days. So if you get the condo resale cert on a Friday and Monday is Labor Day, you would actually start on Tuesday. And it would go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday. I just had 5 days turn into 2 weeks or a week and a half, right? So you just remember, if you get an offer accepted mutual, or if you get negotiations and addendum, once everybody agrees to it, you just don't count the day that it goes mutual. You always count the first day following that applies according to the time frame. Okay. So current condo assessment is the amount specified. That's where I said, remember when I said the dues? But it's subject to change from time to time. Yep, it sure is. Because remember looking at that budget, and if you can see that they had a big shortfall last year, then in all likelihood, those dues are going to go up. So you got to be a little bit of a forensic realtor here to figure out how that works. And that's it. We have now covered condo resale certs. Oh, I wasn't sharing screen. Shame on me. All right, I'm going to go back and do this really, really quick here. Here were the three. Public offering statement. I'm at the very end of the condo purchase and sale. Here's your resale certificate. And here's your condominium assessment that they were talking about. Okay, so those are the only 3 paragraphs that are different from a residential purchase and sale agreement. Those are the only 3 you need to learn if you're going to do a condo. Take a look at your resale certificate. Now you've got better knowledge about that. Take a look at your purchase and sale. You've got better knowledge about that. You know about declarations instead of legals. You know what dues are. You know what special assessments are. So hopefully that has given you a better understanding about condominiums, because we sell a lot of them. We really do. And so you need to be comfortable. And I think the best homework you could do would be to go to an actual condo listing and start looking at the supplements that are in there. Because they're going to cover a lot of stuff. And it's going to cover your reserve studies. A lot of them have reserve studies that are up there. Let me go back and take a peek here. So here we go again. I'm just looking at it. I just pulled up a random listing. I'm going back to supplements. Now that we've covered all this, plat, parcel, and survey preliminary commitment, purpose certification, should always be uploaded with a listing. Survey maps, builder addenda, I went, a feature sheet, which is a great thing to have. This is a $2 million plus condo. It sure would be nice to at least know what they're offering here. My supplements, here we go. Seller disclosure, you'll note there is still a Form 17 that is required, and the legal description is also on there. So it says over here, CC&Rs. So when I open it up, here is CC&Rs, and if you've never read through these, it's a good idea. 58 pages. At least skim through them and have an idea of what's in them, so that when your client asks you, geez, Trish, what's a CC&R? Well, what does it stand for? Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So these are things that run with the property. They don't run with the owner. So they're going to stay for your new buyer. And these are things they need to be aware of. Who pays special assessments? How do they work? For example, in my complex, windows are the individual responsibility of the unit owner, which is really weird. But that was how they set it up. So I can't stress enough that you have your buyer actually look through these, even if they don't know what they're looking for, and have them take a peek. Okay. I am going to skip over, and we are going to start, because I've got about 20 minutes left. We are going to skip and go straight into, unless anybody have any other questions on condos. Do you have a better understanding of them now? Get a little bit better idea of what you're dealing with and the ins and the outs. There are more to them, but here's the trick too. If you're considering going out and prospecting for listings, once you learn a condominium project, it's pretty much cookie cutter from unit to unit, other than the size and the floor plan and everything else. But the HOA doesn't change. It's a great place to go farm. It really is, especially if you make a friend out of the HOA president or the secretary, or you sell a unit in there and you've got a buyer client who moves in and they get on these committees and they meet other people. What better place to work your referral base than in a condo complex? It can be really, really valuable and lucrative. So we covered all that. We covered a lot. Now I'm going to skip over and shift your brain. Now we are going to talk about multifamily. What is multifamily? Well, for purposes of our Northwest Multiple, multifamily means 1 to 4 units. When you get into 5 units or more, it can go on a commercial purchase and sale agreement. You can still use a multifamily if you choose to, but what we call the conforming, and that term comes from a lender, is 1 to 4 units. So that's normally purchase and sale, multifamily, 1 to 4 units, duplex, triplex, fourplex. Can you use it for a 5 unit? Of course you can. So what you're, I hope, starting to see is that once you get the guts of this purchase and sale agreement down, there are very few things that you have to learn. There's going to be a few different items on the front page, and there's going to be a few different paragraphs that go with the purchase and sale agreement. Okay. All this top part looks the same. This one, now we're back to a legal description. Included items. So let me stop at included items though, because let's say this is a 4 unit. And every one of them has a stove, and every one of them has a refrigerator. And let's say it's a high-end one, and every one of them has a washer and dryer. So included items, you would check those boxes, but what if only 3 of them have a washer and dryer and the 4th one didn't, so the tenant went out and bought their own? Well, do I try and write all this in? No. Usually with a multifamily of more than 1 unit, which of course it would be, they usually attach a personal property list. And a personal property list would include all of those things: washer, dryer, stove, refrigerator, anything that is a personal, could be considered personal property, i.e. not attached to the unit. So they're freestanding, and they will attach a personal property list, and they will do it for each unit: unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, unit 4. So what is included in each particular unit? Purchase price, earnest money, it's all looking the same. Matter of fact, the whole front page is the same. Everything on there is the same. And oh, well, okay, that was easy. Let's keep going. Let's find out where we find the difference. Well, earnest money, that's all the same. Included, closing, that's all the same. Oh, wait, let's back up, because back on page 1, it talks about something called possession date. So what happens with a multifamily? Most of them have leases, or at least they have a rental agreement of some type. And the first thing I want to tell you is that those leases and rental agreements survive closing. They transfer with the property. They do not stay with the owner. So one of the things you're going to want to be looking at is what kind of rental agreements go with the property and how long do they run? What kind of rent are they charging? All of that good stuff. So what do you put in for possession date? Subject to tenants' rights, STR, subject to tenants' rights. That's what gets filled in there. So in other words, whatever it says on the leases, that's when you could have possession. So you're buying, let's say, a fourplex, and your buyer wants to move in to one of the to the units. Well, you better take a look and see when they all expire and what you have to give for notice, 90-day notice to get them out of there, so that your owner can move in, or maybe your owner wants to go in and upgrade and update all of the units. Well, when are the leases up? When can I get them out so that I can go in and update the units? So that's really important to know. We're going to go, I'm kind of skipping through all this because none of this is any different. They still have, each one of them has to have carbon monoxide, closing costs, all that other good stuff. This is all the same. Computation of time, condition, property condition. Aha, I went to the very end, and the last paragraph is the one that you need to look for when you're looking at a multifamily purchase and sale agreement. This has to do with books, records, leases, and agreements. Anything that the seller has an agreement for, whether it's a third-party management, maybe they have a coin-operated washer and dryer. They've got leases that run, they just re-upped them all, and they all run through June of 23. What are their books? That is their financial. How much are they paying every month? What are their costs? What are their expenses? And then with a multifamily, you are going to, in all likelihood, have an inspection done. Just know that that inspection is going to be more expensive than a regular residential. Why? Because they're going to go through multiple units as opposed to just going through one unit. That's also a really great time for your buyer to be able to go in and inspect every unit. So the odds of the buyer being able to go in and inspect a unit, all of them, prior to making the offer is pretty slim. Sometimes they can, but usually they might get in to see one of them. They're going to make their offer and they are going to do their simultaneous look-see. They're going to see the other units at the same time the inspection is done, because that inspector is going to have to get into every single unit. Well, you might as well have your client, the buyer, traipse along with the inspector, and they can see the unit then without the tenant being there. And that's up to the property management company to arrange. So, seller shall make available for inspection by buyer and its agents as soon as possible, but no later than 10 days after mutual acceptance, all documents available to seller relating to the ownership, operation, renovation, or development of the property, including but without limitation, statements for real estate taxes, assessments, utilities, property management agreements. I'll stop there for a second. If they've got a property manager, a professional property manager, all of that information will be available through the property manager. They're probably not going to give it to you directly, but the listing broker can sure request it on your behalf and or the seller. Service contracts, agreements with professional. Let's say the owner, the current owner, is self-managing. They may have a landscaping agreement for somebody to come over and mow the lawn. They may have a pest company that comes in once a month and sprays for bugs. They need to see all of that good stuff. The only thing normally that survives closing is going to be the leases. However, occasionally, some property management companies try to make the claim that their property management agreement survives closing. I'm not of that belief. but that's something you'll need to take a really close look at and possibly do some negotiations. Because usually the new owner does not want to stick with the old property management company. I don't know why, it just doesn't work that way. So agreements with professionals or consultants entered into by the seller or any predecessor entitled to the seller, leases of personal property and fixtures. That might be that they might have a coin op washer dryer. Maybe this is they have a special laundry room and they're all leased fixtures. Leases or other agreements relating to the schedule of, this is a schedule. So a schedule is a list. Tenants, rents, deposits, plans, specs, permits, applications, drawings, surveys, studies, and maintenance records, all of that good stuff. Trisha actually did property management for years. She probably could be, she could be filling me in on a lot of this good stuff. Accounting, audit records, all that good stuff. If buyer in their sole discretion doesn't give notice of disapproval. So let's say that the seller had 10 days to provide them. And I will tell you right now, they usually don't get them in 10 days. You're probably going to get them on day 12. But anyway, the buyer has 10 days after receiving the document to do their review. And it's not uncommon for a listing broker and or a seller to exaggerate the expenses being less than they are and or the income being greater than it actually is. So you need to go in and you need to look at this with a fine-tooth comb. The lender is also going to be taking a look at this as if you're getting a bank loan. Where's the best place to get a list of all of the expenses? You can get them from the property management, but you can also get them from the seller's tax return schedule if they will give it to you. You don't want to see the whole tax return because they freak out. I don't want to see your tax return. I just want to see the schedule on the tax return for that rental property to show me what you actually are claiming for deductions on the property. What are the expenses that you're writing off? And remember, buyer has 10 days for a look-see, and if you don't raise your hand in those 10 days, and what kind of days are these? Calendar days. You get mutual on Friday, but in this particular case, or let's say you get the documents on a Friday and you've got 10 days, the clock starts ticking the next business day or the next day, which would be Saturday in this case. So we're going to go Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, assuming that's not a holiday. That's when it's going to end, is a week and a half out on a Monday, because these are more than 5 days. These are going to be calendar days. If buyer gives that notice, the agreement terminates, and buyer shall be solely responsible for obtaining any required consents to assume leases. Seller transfers all of their interest in the leases, and it's basically done at closing. What else gets done at closing? Well, if you remember, when you rent a property, there's usually something called a security deposit. And that security deposit is sitting in a bank account on behalf of the tenant. But don't forget, when you close on this property, that security deposit needs to be transferred to your buyer, because otherwise, let's say you've got a tenant that moves out in 6 months and they say, okay, great, Gavin, I need my $1,000 deposit back. I left the place immaculate. And you're like, $1,000 deposit? I don't have it. The guy that sold it to me has it. We'll have to go find him. No. That should all be transferred, and it will be transferred if you alert your escrow officer at closing. They will actually transfer those security deposits over to the new buyer. I skipped over the surface of that. Trish, you want to jump in? I think you're here. This lady did property management, still does property management for like 10 plus years.
30.
30? All right, 30.
Just shoot me.
She's got her hat on because her hair is gray.
No, yeah, that, and I didn't get a chance to shower. You're right. What would you? I don't think I heard.
What are some you run into with? You run into anything with potential buyers, things that get forgot, things that become red flags, owners that say, oh, the expenses are only this, and yet when they provide their tax return, they're actually that. Have you run into any of that?
Yeah, I think it happens quite often, but I think more so it's usually, unfortunately, I hate to be calling people out, it's usually the listing broker really doesn't have any idea how leases work or anything. And they just think that the buyer's going to be able to come in and do whatever they wish. And that lease is legal and binding. And that security deposit, as you said, I mean, it is sitting in a trust account. It is tenants' money. It is not the landlord's.
Mhm.
So it does need to be watched. And if almost any professional management company should be able to get the ledgers, all the expenses, going back several years if they've managed it for several years. And that stuff is real important to review so that it is accurate.
Right. I'm gonna go find here. I can. It's I would say more common than not for a listing broker and or a seller. We'll give the listing broker the benefit of the doubt and just say they just went with the numbers that the seller gave them. But I would say in most cases, a lot of cases, like I said, the expenses are exaggerated on the downside and the income could be exaggerated on the upside, but usually they underestimate the expenses or they self-manage. So they don't pay a management company. Well, a management company can charge anywhere from 3 to 10% of the gross monthly rent that comes in. And so if they're self-managing, that expense isn't going to show up on the expenses. So when your client is looking at what it's going to cost them to run this thing every month, and there's no property management fee in there, and then they go hire ABC Property Management Company and they say, oh yeah, we charge 8% a month and your gross rents are $4,000. That's money, 8% times $4,000 that you haven't factored into your expenses and you need to.
Right.
Right. Donovan, I know you do multifamily too. You sell it. What are some of the things that you run into? Anything funny or weird out there? Inspections, that's all right. Now it's down at the bottom on the left.
There we go. I found it.
Hi.
Well, with my multifamilies, they're a little bigger than 5 units. So the complication there was they were self-managed. So coming up with that NOI and that documentation for the past few years, plus we were in COVID.
What's NOI again? Remind everybody.
It's your net operating income.
And then what is the definition of that?
That is basically what you bring in to what your costs are.
Right. So you've got your gross income, which is all the money that flows in from rent, and you've got your operating costs, which are your expenses, and the bottom line. So your gross income minus your expenses is your NOI or your net operating income. There's your new terminology for the day.
There's a lot to that. For me, being brand new with that, it was a huge learning. It's not just the rent bringing it in from your renters and the expenses of electricity and water and stuff. I mean, you're talking garbage, you're talking the income off of your washers and dryers if you have some coin operated. So there's a lot of little things that you might not even think of. So you really have to engage with your seller or their management company if they have one, which is a lot easier to work with than just the seller, because as Lori said, they really want to sway to income being higher and costs being lower. And when you have that many units, it can really make or break things at the end when they find out, ooh, we really are spending a whole lot more money restoring these units than what is really being said. So
let me ask you another question. So I know you did some really big complexes. So when you have an inspection done on inspection day, Donovan, what is that like? And I'll be honest. I mean, I know of people who have sold these really big. The inspection might last 2 or 3 days to get through all of the units. It might not be over in one. So what does it look like on inspection day, and how do you go back and negotiate on that? Let's say you find some really major problems with the property.
So our inspection, the buyer of all 4 of my complexes just brought his management company and he self-inspected. We were only able to let him into so many units in each one. And one unit was a complete disaster. One thing nice about the units that I had sold was Opportunity Council paid for a lot of the units. And if Opportunity Council has this clause that if the unit is damaged by their renter, Opportunity Council will pay to have it fixed. So we were fortunate that the one that was just, I mean, literally took wiring out of the wall, plumbing out of the wall, just damaged it really bad. We could put into the contract that it would be completely fixed back to where the other units were. May not be prior to closing, but would be done without a doubt. So
That's which how great is that for your seller?
that was huge.
Or your buyer,
I'm very fortunate that we had a great buyer too, that he really didn't even care. He's like, that was pennies on the dollar, but it just made him that much more confident in everything being out there on the table, that he didn't have to really, cross every T and dot every I.
So was that a cash sale, Donovan, or did they finance it?
It was cash.
Okay, so if they finance, how do you go about finding a lender that will finance a 30-unit complex, for example? Because a 1-to-4 is easy. Anybody that does conventional financing will do a 1-to-4. That's everybody. That's Umpqua, that's Peoples, that's everybody will do one of those. But when you get into 5 and more unit, now you're into the non-conforming world. How do you go about shopping for a lender?
Well, the portfolio lenders are slim and far between. Nice thing is I guess since that was kind of my first sale, they kind of reach out to me now and try to facilitate whatever they can. So yeah, me personally just talked to the lenders that I know, and they kind of led me,
Right.
which was good for me because I kind of thought every lender out there took care of all kinds of loans. Well, you find out, no, we take care of portfolio loans, or we do just residential or just commercial. So it was a learning.
There's a pretty good sized pool. If anybody on this call gets stuck, see me. I actually keep a file. I get these emails occasionally. Seattle Funding Group, for example, sends me emails all the time about all the different non-conforming loan products that they offer, and I keep them. So while they may come, what we say, in and out of the market, maybe today they're doing it, maybe tomorrow they don't have the appetite for it, at least it's worth a phone call, and you have to do your investigative research. So that's the other thing. Excuse me. If you do take a listing on a property that's 5 or more units, one of the pieces, and condos, this is the same because they're not all cookie cutter, is part of your job, I believe, as a listing broker, is to get on the phone, call around, and find a handful of lenders that will make a loan when a buyer comes along on this property. Because what you don't want to have happen is Susie Q, selling broker, brings her buyer, the buyer picks up the phone, calls KeyBank or People's Bank or whatever, and they're like, oh no, that hasn't been approved, we're not going to do it. So if you can say right out of the chute, look, I've already made some calls and here's 3 lenders that will be happy to finance on this project, that just makes their job so much easier and will be less inclined to give them cold feet. So, okay, I ran 4 minutes over, but I think we did good. We covered a lot of territory this morning. So thank you guys all for showing up. You got any other questions, let me know. And we are going to be meeting again on Wednesday. And this is going to be a good one you won't want to miss because it's on owner financing. And that is one where the seller is the lender. So the buyer wants to put a certain amount of money down and they want the seller to carry the paper or be the lender. And this is the one that you're never going to care about until you run into the situation. Donovan.
Very common in multifamily also.
Ah, Yeah, so owner owns it free and clear. They want to do their own financing, nice annuity stream. They're going to get maybe 6% interest on this, and the seller's going to pay lender. What a great deal for the seller. Because
It
where
is.
else can you go get 6% on your money with a nice steady annuity stream coming in every month? Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Makes it a nice start to make your money start working for you, for sure.
Absolutely. And the other advantage of them is they're quick closes. They can literally close in just a few days because you don't have a bank involved. You don't have a lender involved. You don't have all of those hoops that a buyer has to jump through. So anyway, join me. So this week we're doing Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to wrap up. Thursday is going to be all about buyer agency. I'm going to try and get a couple people on the call that are better at this than I am. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So thank you guys for joining me. 8:30 Wednesday, 8:30 Thursday, and I hope to see you all then. Have a great day. Bye.